In today's video, we're taking this Necron Doom Scythe from this to this. My name's Josh, and welcome to the Pickle Jar. As I'm sure you can tell from my recent videos, I'm really enjoying working through my Necron back catalogue and expanding my army with a load of fun new units. Now, I picked up this Doom Scythe from Mayfield Miniatures along with a load of other bits and pieces a couple of weeks ago. If you don't know what Mayfield Miniatures is, I have done a couple of videos on them in the past, so I'll link those in the top right hand corner for you sometime around now. Now, this model was thankfully already built because you guys know I hate building miniatures, so I got to work priming it ready to paint. Now, I am going to be using the airbrush quite a lot in this video. You don't need to worry, you can do everything either with a rattle can or a normal brush. I'm just using the airbrush because it's a lot more accurate and a lot faster to do the bits and pieces that I'm doing. And I've got this cool tool that I want to use, and it's time for you guys to all put your big boy pants on and just get over the fact that I'm using an airbrush. Once it's primed black, I'm going to go over some of the parts with a silver. Now, the main section for this is the wings, but there are a few other little bits and pieces like the spine and the engines at the back. Now, the silver that I'm using is Vallejo Metal Colour Magnesium, which is easily my favourite silver paint at the moment. You can use this with the airbrush and you can use it with a brush as well. It goes on super smooth and it flows really nice on a brush, so no issues using it that way. You just need to make sure they've got a nice even covering of this all over, and then we'll be moving on to the marbling effect. So while that is to one side and drying, we're going to sort out the marble effect, and to do that we're going to use wet wipes. Now, I want to do a metallic green marble effect on the wings, so the easiest way to do it is with a wet wipe. All you need to do is get your wet wipe, stretch it out, and when you stretch it, it creates little holes in the fabric that are sort of like random patterns. And then you can put this over the top of the surface you're wanting to paint and spray through it either with a rattle can or an airbrush, and it will create a marble effect. So stretch it all out, then leave it out to dry for a couple of hours just so that it's not still damp, and then all you need to do is wrap it around the surface that you're wanting to spray. Now, the tighter the better, the closer to the surface the better, just so the paint doesn't spread as far when you're spraying through it. And that's it. All you do, wrap it up tight, hold it tight, spray it either with your rattle can or your airbrush, give it a couple of good passes, a good covering of paint on there, leave it for a couple of minutes just to make sure the paint has dried that's gone through, and then take the wet wipe off. And that is as easy as it is. It sounds super simple, but this is the cool effect that you can get. It really is that simple. There's a few other different ways, different techniques to do marbling and stuff, but for me, this is super easy. It looks really nice, and it's really quick to do, so it suits me to the ground. With the silver on, it's now time to add the green. For this, I'm going to use the Dark Angels Green contrast paint and apply that over the top. What this does is it blends the whole thing together, tinting the silver that's left showing and blending to a darker green on the black areas. Now, I did possibly go a little bit too heavy with the contrast paint on this particular piece, going a little bit darker than I'd maybe originally intended to. That's just lesson learned, I guess. Don't go quite as heavy. It still looks really nice and it has a really nice effect, but I maybe wanted to try and go a little bit more translucent so that the silver showed through a little bit brighter rather than it being such a dark green. But like I say, lesson learned, and I'll know for next time. It still looks really good and I'm still really happy with the end result. Now that the wings are done, it's time to block in some of the other sections. Now, for the main cockpit section, I'm using a rough iron from Army Painter. Now, this goes on really nice and smooth, and it's surprisingly a very good metallic paint. Not one that I've used a lot in the past, but recently I got a bottle and started using it for a couple of bits and pieces, and I was quite impressed with it. So yeah, I'd recommend this one. All I'm doing is making sure to brush in the same direction so that my brush strokes don't go all mismatched and stuff. Going from front to back or from back to front, all in the same direction. I've not really thinned this down at all. It's on my wet palette, so it's thinned slightly, just naturally by being on my wet palette, but I've not added anything purposefully to thin it down. It goes on quite nice even covering. And then once that's on, I'm going to go over all of this section with a purple shade. And what this does, it creates like a weird sort of purpley, tarnished purple metallic, like dull metallic look. It's really, really nice. It looks really messy when it's going on, but once it's all on and the wash and shade is all dried, it looks absolutely fantastic. This is the same technique that I used for the sort of floating bodies on my destroyers, for the big armored shell on the top of my Doomstalker. It creates a really, really nice look, and it's perfect for the colour that I want on these. Now that that section was done, I decided to move on to the weapons. Now for these, I wanted to do some nice bright glowing effects with the airbrush. Now I primed the pieces in an off-white with the airbrush first, and then started applying my base green over the top. Now the reason I'm using the airbrush for this bit is because it's a nice easy way to provide a glowing effect, because the drop off from the spray as it goes further away from where you're aiming, it creates a natural glowing effect automatically. So I started off with the white, then I applied the base green, and then once that was on, I applied a second coat of green, a brighter green, and tried to aim this more at the center of each section, so the actual weapons themselves or the coils, and trying to avoid that overspray a little bit, so that the further out the spray goes, the darker it is, leaving the brightest points as the actual weapons themselves or the coils. Now, it really doesn't take a lot of effort to do this. This is super simple. You can do this with dry brushing. If you use soft dry brushing and stuff like that, you can do the same sort of thing. It's just not quite as natural and soft. It's a little bit of a harsher blend, but you can do it absolutely fine. So if you want to try that, then just do it with a soft dry brush. For the cables, I simply based them in an off-white and then used the same bright green from the airbrush, painting them on with the brush. Now you can see that the colour is a lot more saturated when I'm applying it this way. It's the same colour that I've used on the guns, but it looks completely different when applying it with a brush. Now switching between application methods is a great way to add different interest with the same colour on a model and just give some different looks. Now I decided on the whole that the model was a little bit too pristine and clean. I like my vehicles to look a little bit battle worn, especially as these are Necrons and they've been literally around for millions and millions of years. So I took a couple of different silvers and used the tried and tested sponge method, dabbing around the edges, raised sections, and just anywhere else that I thought looked like it could do with some scuffs and scrapes. I was worried that I would be going a little bit overboard with this, so I took it a step at a time until I was happy with the end result. Now I painted up the main gun separately because I like to leave this separate. That way I can pick and choose between using this as a Doom Scythe or a Night Scythe, because the gun and the portal both clip into this model without needing magnetizing or anything like that. I did the same thing as I did on the weapons earlier on. I primed the entire gun black and then silver, and then I repeated the green glow effect from the other weapons. I did get to create a bit of a gradient on the big crystal because it was that little bit bigger than the rest of the weapons, going from the brightest at the tip to the darker green further back on the crystal, and I'm quite happy with how this looks. It's very subtle, and I did think about maybe adding some off-white on the very tip of the weapon, but decided that it would look a little bit off compared to all the rest of the green, so I decided to just keep it with the bright green going to the dark green. With it all clipped in place, I decided that I needed to go back to the cockpit section and add some green glow to the glyphs. There was a lot of bright colour underneath, and I felt that this needed to be mirrored somewhat on top. Once again, I sprayed off-white and then used the base green colour that I'd used earlier on. I actually liked this colour by itself without adding the brighter green, so I left it at that. Now this adds a little bit more variety, so it's not just the same green across the entire model, and it adds a different glow colour. Now that I'm happy with the model itself, it's time to move on to the base and make that look a little bit interesting. Now the rest of my Necron force is based fairly simply. I use the Mars Earth base ready from Geek Gaming Scenics with a few neon red and pink grass tufts from Gamergrass. Now this base is fairly large, so I decided to add a couple of broken Necron columns from TT Combat. It's not going to win any awards in a diorama contest, but it does add a little bit of something to the base because otherwise it would have just been really empty. I painted this up quickly, adding yet another glow to the glyphs in a slightly different green yet again. After that, it was as simple as adding on the glue, sprinkling on the base ready, adding a few tufts, and then this model was ready for the cabinet. I already have a good core of Necron warriors and elites, so it's been fun recently to paint a variety of different models for my army. Tweaking the colour scheme to fit each one is a fun challenge by itself, but seeing all the army come together in the cabinet definitely gives me a nice feeling, and seeing it all on the table is even better. That's going to do it for this one, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, be sure to leave a like down below. If you're brand new, consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to help support us, there are all our affiliate links down below in the description. And while you're there, you'll also find a link to our Discord server where you can come and hang out with the Pickle family. That's going to do it from me, guys. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, enjoy your hobby.